From the Ticats Audio Network, this is Tiger Cats Game Day with Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly.
Welcome to Tiger Cats Game Day, presented by Tiffany Gate Fresh Gourmet on the Ticats Audio Network. My name is Courtney Stephen. It is Week 15, and Winnipeg is coming to the hammer today to face off against the 5-7 Ticats in this beginning of the final third of the 2023 season. And to get you all primed and ready for the action that's kicking off at 4 p.m. today, I'm with my man, Mike Daly. Mike, last time that we played Winnipeg, I mean, it was quite the game, but Winnipeg last week, they rolled, and they're coming in here with some momentum. So what can we expect to see today, and what are some of the key headlines heading into this one?
Yeah, you're talking about, I mean, the first week, it feels like, it's a completely different team for the Ticats back in that game, right? But for Winnipeg, it's not really, right? They've kind of found their groove, and if it was a week before, if we got to play Winnipeg after that Labor Day game that they had, I'd be like, ooh, this is juicy. This is prime for the Ticats to come in here and upset Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg put on a clinic last week. So the Ticats coming in off that win and off a good win against Ottawa, because you think that rest was ridiculous, right? 3 days rest after a game, and to come in and play the way they did and get a win against a team off of a bye that Ottawa was. But listen, it's no easy task against Winnipeg, because that last game was, like I said, an absolute clinic, right? Their offense was rolling, their defense was rolling. One of the better games you've seen a CFL team play in the last little bit. So talk about a test for the Ticats coming in. But Court, call me crazy, right? And Tiger Town might be with me here, I hope, but the way this Ticats team is trending and the way Taylor Powell is starting to sling this rock, like, it's no more of, hey, Taylor Powell needs to learn a little bit, like all these conversations we've had before. I like how he's playing, and I like how this offense is trending in the right direction. Tim White blowing up and James Butler getting involved as much as he is. I like where this is trending.
Man, Tim White had 180 yards, 2 touchdowns for those who missed it. Taylor Powell, 326 and 3 touchdowns. So that offense is definitely coming together, and Scott Milanovich's fingerprints are all over that since he's come to the helm of this offense and started calling the shots. But they're going to need every ounce of that firepower going up against this Winnipeg team who rolled Saskatchewan in the Banjo Bowl. That was quite the performance. Like you said, one of the most impressive displays of offense that we've seen recently in the CFL. No 2-and-outs, scored every time they got in the red zone. They had scored on like 7 consecutive possessions or something incredible like that. And, they got weapons all over the place. So that is going to be a challenge for this Ticats D, which finally has a little bit of shuffling going on, but for all the wrong reasons. A couple of guys are banged up. So let's dive right into this one and look at the roster. And instead of starting on the offense this week, let's talk about this Ticats defense, because that's where there's going to be some interesting things happening. So right off the hop, Richard Leonard is out of the game, and Lawrence Woods comes in at the field corner, and Tunde Adeleke is out of the game right next to him, and we've got Lawson stepping into that position. So you've got rookies all over the place. You've got guys who haven't got a lot of experience playing together in that back end, and very quickly it turns from familiar faces to folks who are trying to still build their bonds with each other, work on their communication. How is that matchup look for the Ticats as they're getting ready to play against one of the most explosive offenses in the CFL right now?
You set me up with that question, Court, because it doesn't look great, man. It doesn't look great, right? Like, you have an experienced guy like Tunde, and we talk all the time about Richard Leonard. Like, we have to understand with that field corner position, right? It's like another free safety. What it does is somebody that understands the CFL game, understands if, the number one receiver is running a short route. Well, I already know that there's a corner route over top of me. And talk about Winnipeg's offense, Dalton Schoen and Dembski. That's what Zach and those two live off of is the corner route. All they do is wait for some sort of man coverage. And Dembski has a lot of moves to get himself open on those corner routes, right? Dalton Schoen has a lot of moves. That field corner position is able to take away two routes if you are an experienced field corner. When you lose a guy like Dundee and Rich Leonard out there, now it's just a lot of space to run and cover a receiver running about 100 different sticks on his route and then getting to those outbreakers. So it does spell, a tough matchup, man, for Lawson and Woods to be out there and against especially a high-powered offense like Winnipeg. But this is where it gets me excited because Stavros Katsantonis has been kind of on a heater, right? 2 interceptions the past 2 games, but he was that young guy that was in there. Now what you have to see is kind of his leadership role that's going to come out and play because now it's young guys around him, right? He's no longer that young guy listening to Tunde and Rich Leonard out there and helping him out. Now he's got to help these young guys kind of get on track and get them in the right position. So, it's going to be a building game for Stavros, but yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup for those guys out there on the field, especially like with Dembski and Schoen and Woltarski out there, who Zach continually goes to game after game.
Yeah, and that we'll talk about Demmer and the boys a little bit more in a second, but Stavros has been making his plays in the passing game, finding range, getting to the balls that are hanging up there, or maybe they're thrown over the middle where they shouldn't be, and whether it's breaking downhill and picking one off right in front of the receiver, or just being in the right spot in alignment to catch an overthrow. He's been doing a great job of that. In this game, for him to show up and take that next step as asserting himself as one of the top safeties in this league, I'm going to need to see 2 things from him, and that's get everybody lined up. One of the main things that happens when you have fresh faces in the huddle is that assignments get blown. And when the real bullets are flying on game day, it's not like day 2 practice when you're practicing second downs. You see a card in the meeting room, you step out on the field, and it's just like they drew it up in the meeting room. They're literally sitting on the bus, on the plane, in the hotel room, thinking of ways to confuse you. So you need somebody beside you to make sure that you know what you know, and you're going to be able to play fast, and you're going to be on the same page. Even if they're on the wrong page, if everybody's on the same page, they can play. So Stavros needs to make sure that both of his halves, he needs to make sure that his linebackers, his corners, everybody is on one accord, and that's going to be the first step. The second thing I'm going to need from him is going up against this offense that has guys like Nick Dembski, who is a great yards after the catch guy, and who an offense that has a great running game. I'm going to need Stavros to have as many tackles as he's probably ever had in his career, because there will be some broken tackles, but you need an eraser back there to clean it up. And I think this is a game where he'll have an opportunity to do that. So I'm interested to see, yes, hope for him to get some picks. I want to make sure that there's solid tackles, and I want no blown coverages. And I'm going to hang that one on Stavros to get the boys lined up.
And well, to be fair, Court, on that as well, right? You look at guys like, now you start leaning on a guy like Chris Edwards, right? Who's been around in the league and knows this defense and can help those guys out standing right beside them, right? A Jameer Thurman, a Simone Lawrence, just to not necessarily help them get lined up because they have their own job to do, but almost slow it down for them, right? Slow it down for them. And that all falls back onto a Mark Washington, making the calls simple and easy enough for these guys to be able to line up and play fast. Right, so maybe look to dial it back on some of those more exotic blitzes and the coverages, and kind of go to the more base stuff, the cover 3s, right, the cover 4s, that kind of zone coverage where many of the guys would have repped plenty of times, whether it was on scout team or in training camp before. So maybe slow it down a little bit for them.
Absolutely. Then you're going to see the Malik Carney and Trey Crawford on the defensive ends. Those guys would have to get some pressure on Zach Collaros in the backfield just to give the DBs a little bit more support. If Zach has all day to create, which he does, his thing is really extending plays and getting outside of the pocket, changing a launch point, giving receivers a chance to be creative and to just find the gaps in the coverage. If they can keep Zach bottled in, that will go a very, very long way. That cannot be overstated. Casey Sales, Ted Laurent in the middle, creating that push in the pocket, collapsing it in. Hopefully they could get some hands up in some throwing lanes. But now let's talk about the people on the other side. that offensive line is really one of the better ones in the Canadian Football League, and it has been. Stanley Bryant, Hardrick on the tackles. Those are humongous human beings, and so this is not going to be an easy task. And then, of course, Brady Oliveira, who's now up over that 1,000-yard rushing mark. He's a Canadian guy who earned everything that he got as far as opportunities, and now that he's been the featured back for a long time, he's showing people why that's so with the performances he's had. Went over 100 yards last week, and I think he's the type of guy who, they've clinched their playoff spot, but if he's in the game, he doesn't care about any of that kind of stuff. He's not holding back. He wants to punish. He wants to run downhill. How did the Ticats slow down a running game like that when you know that Winnipeg's going to come in here and try to establish the run?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it. It all starts with that offensive line. Like, you look at, they've had this offensive line together for a long period of time. And for good reason, all the running backs, whoever it is back there, right? Brady Oliveira this year, when it was Andrew Harris before, even when like a guy like Johnny Augustine gets in there, they're able to still run that ball. Right, and it all starts with up front. They're physical bunch. You see it on film. They'll finish to what we call the echo of the whistle, which is maybe a little bit after the whistle, right, but still within a legal range. So they're physical and they're an angry and mean bunch. So when you look at that D line, right, especially like a Ted Laurent, Casey Sales, who knows them very well, which will help, right, help some of the calls. He might be able to hear some of the calls, understand what's going on. Right, so they'll have to switch something up a little bit. And with the noise of, Tim Hortons Field, it's going to be difficult for that offensive line to try to switch up what Casey Sales knows, but also be talking to each other. And then you put in Ted Laurent, who is the ultimate run stopper, right? He has been his entire career. So matchup-wise, I like it on the Ticats. The only thing that hurts is with Dylan Wynn out. Now you're talking about that rotational pressure that you have, once Teddy gets tired or Casey gets tired. To not have Dylan Wynn in there hurts a little bit, but that's where it's going to end up being, on those two defensive tackles, to not get moved and washed on these double teams, right? When two offensive linemen are trying to push them and then work up to the linebacker to block them off. To hold that ground, allow your linebacker to see in behind them and be able to step around and make a play on that tackle.
And coming in to spell the D-line will be Jared Hewitt, Mason Bennett, Jagarrett Davis back in the lineup. And of course, we've got Jonathan Kongbo as well. So the defensive line, they will have a task in front of them, and they will be asked to step up, as they always have been asked to step up. And it's not getting any easier. So like I mentioned, Winnipeg has clinched the playoff spot. Toronto has clinched the playoff spot. Now, there's a couple of guys who are injured and out for the Ticats. If you're Winnipeg right now, and you have a couple guys who are a little banged up, is it too early to rest those guys? Or do you give those guys a little bit of time off and allow them to heal so that they can still have reps towards the back part of the season? You're heading into the playoffs for potentially a bye week, but you're getting a little bit of a chance to knock the rust off in those last couple weeks of the season. Do they rest now? Do they rest later if they're a little banged up? How are you playing that as a coach?
Yeah, it's tough because everybody still wants that home field advantage, right? They want to absolutely lock up. Yeah, clinching the playoffs is great, right? Gives you a shot at the Grey Cup, but you want to clinch that home field advantage. So I think you don't take the foot off the gas right now until you clinch that. But that, I think, becomes, now that you've clinched playoffs and it's looking, maybe a little bit closer, that you have a good stranglehold, especially in the Toronto situation where, you can kind of clinch that home field advantage. It's, right there in sight. There's a lot of guys that play this game with help from certain things to get them through a game, right? Whatever it might be. And I'll talk from personal experience. I was freezing my shoulder for pretty much a whole season to get through a game.
I had a feeling you weren't talking about meditation.
Yeah, not meditation, not any of these float pools, stuff like that. It's something scientifically helping out to make you through this game, right? So maybe guys like that, guys that are on the brink of like just getting held together, not really practicing throughout the week, but showing up for a game. Maybe this is the time for those teams to be like, you know what, let's take it easier. Let's get them just a few plays in this game, and then we'll pull them out, right? And you start looking at the Ticats schedule, and they have Winnipeg now, right? Toronto maybe down the road by the time they might clinch the home playoff spot, who knows? But what that does is that now puts your starters, a team like Hamilton, trying to get that second place, right? Get a home playoff game initially. Maybe it gives them a little bit of a chance. But for this Winnipeg game, I just don't see that popping up right now. But maybe look for a guy like Brady or something like that to come out, maybe third quarter, maybe after the half, whatever it might be. But I know as the Ticats are looking for this game, they're looking to play against the starters all game long, right? And they need to do their own business and win each game.
Yeah, I think if you don't have to take the Toradals, then you won't be taking those once the little X is next to your team's name on that standing. So, really getting a chance to just play it smart, right? Not have the same pressure, knowing that there's a lot of football left to play, where every game is actually the opposite of a must win. That must be a nice feeling, but that's not where the Ticats are at right now. We're trying to get healthy. We're trying to find ways to scrap and fight so that when we play against Montreal in the last game of the season, that game is meaningful for the position of where we're going to finish in the East. That's going to be a race. It's really Montreal, Hamilton battling it out to see who will be able to play a home playoff game in the East. So that's an interesting storyline to follow. Now let's talk a little bit about this offense for the Ticats, because we alluded to it a little bit. Taylor Powell, the guy's taking care of the ball, starting to find the end zone. He's put in 300 yards, almost 300 yards in a couple of games now. Over 300 and almost 300 in a couple of games now. So he's starting to find a little bit of a groove. One thing they haven't been able to do yet is really find that end zone early and set the tempo and play from the front. And I think in a game like this one, where there's a potential to kind of play in a position of desperation, if this other team gets the ball, they start running it, bleeding the clock, you're going to want to jump all over this Winnipeg team early. So how is Taylor Powell and the rest of this offense going to approach this game? Do you think this is the same as usual? We're just going to find a lot of Tim White, or are they mixing it up? Do you see anything in Winnipeg's defense that is worthy of highlighting as an attack point?
Yeah, well, it's tough, man. As good as we were talking about this Winnipeg offense, the Winnipeg defense is doing really well, right? They're second in the league for points against, right? They're first in the league for yards against. And so this defense is good, right? They have a lot of good players on the back end. Mario Houston's leading the league in interceptions right now. What Winnipeg does on defense, and what they do really well, is they rush for, and they try to get you to throw all the in-breaker routes. Those are the ones they're playing. These defensive backs are playing outside leverage, and what they're doing is Brandon Alexander is one of the best at the league at it. He's going to flat foot everything. So what that means is all he's doing is he's backing up a little bit, waiting for these dig routes, these intermediate windows in behind the linebackers, and he's jumping all over these things. The other defensive backs, the halfbacks, the corners, right? They're playing outside leverage. So one of the favorite routes in the CFL is corners, right? These deep outs, right? This is where Tim White makes his hay on plays like that, right? So really the way they're doing this, they're funneling into kind of their more experienced, their big playmaker guys, the Adam Bighills, the Brandon Alexanders, right? They're trying to get all these routes to go this way so that these guys can make the plays. But the way that works for Winnipeg is because they have two guys named Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat. Jackson Jeffcoat is out this game, right? So they're going to have a new guy in there. When Winnipeg can rush for and get to the quarterback and put pressure on, it makes it hard for those window throws to be on time and pass, an Adam Bighill or a Brandon Alexander. But with the Jackson Jeffcoat out, now hopefully Taylor Powell will have a little bit more time to be able to wrap a guy like a Bighill, right? To be able to set up these double move routes on a safety that's trying to drive downhill on stuff and open up this game. But what that means is that this new look O-line, which we'll dive into because it's absolutely blowing my mind when I saw the depth chart, but this new look O-line is going to have to hold up a little bit, but nicely that they only have a Willie Jefferson to deal with as opposed to a Willie and a Jackson Jeffcoat this game.
Oh my goodness. I hope everybody paid their admission, because we're getting a master's class right here in coverage schemes. This is beautiful, people. This is football. And I think you're absolutely right. You got big playmakers in the middle who the action is being funneled towards. A guy like Adam Bighill, who's been known through his career from playing numbers and numbers as a linebacker, knocking people out tackling, actually getting his hands on picks and whatnot. So that makes sense why that would be the strategy. And also the counterpunch being the new person on that defensive line. I could see the Ticats trying to take advantage of that, maybe with some, backfield actions that are going to get people to kind of pause in their tracks a little bit and really have to think about their assignment as it changes dynamically, pulling the guard or running a counter or adding somebody to the box from a receiver's standpoint. I think they definitely do have to play the mental chess game, but there was absolutely some galaxy brains involved in setting up this offense for the Ticats, because I'm having a hard time keeping up. There's some things that I think we need to unpack and digest and just explain to some folks. Now, normally Brandon Revenberg, you can find him on the left guard. He likes to put his hand down in the dirt with somebody on the outside of him and somebody on the inside of him. But he is listed as the left tackle in a position where we would normally find one Joel Figueroa. Now, Joel Figueroa, I don't know if he had a bad week at practice or if there's a strategy here, but he is listed as the fifth fullback behind Sean Thomas Erlington, Felix Grand-Gauthier, Bailey Feltmate, and Dayton Black. So, can you please explain to the good people of the Ticats audio network, why is Joel Figueroa, the designated American, listed as the fifth fullback instead of the starting left tackle where we would usually find him?
Yeah, and I think this comes back to, like you said, the designated American spot. So what it is there are Americans on the team that have been with the same team for 3 years or in the CFL for 5 years. What they're able to do is they're able to back up a Canadian, which at this point is a fullback, and they can play 23 plays for that Canadian. So, do I know everything? Absolutely not. Because what I am very curious to see, just like Tiger Town is curious to see, is where Joel Figueroa will go in. What I think is going to happen is for his 23 plays, he's going to go in at left tackle. You're going to see Revenberg move back to his left guard spot. Now, the thing is once his 23 plays are done, then what is going to happen? Right? And that is what's up in the air for me. And Court, I don't know about you if you have an idea with this, but what I think is that after those 23 plays are done, if he has to come out and he can't play anymore, then Jacob Zott, right, a new signee halfway through the year, played in Ottawa, started his first year and then kind of bounced around. He's going to have to go in and really protect for this offense, and really his first game as a Ticat. So, Court, I don't know if you can help me unpack this a little bit, but what I do know is Joel Figueroa will be at the left tackle for at least 23 plays. From that point on, it's up in the air for me.
Yeah, the only thing that I could imagine is if the Ticats, instead of going to the traditional two-back set, which means they would have James Butler and Sean Thomas Erlington in the game, potentially Sean Thomas Erlington would maybe step out to a receiver spot, and that would allow Fig to come in for McAllister or Bayless. But instead of playing receiver, obviously Fig is going to become like a sixth O lineman, and they play with four receivers. You'd have two Canadians. You'd probably have Sean Thomas Erlington, or you could have Richie Sindani along with Keandre Smith, and then you'd have Terry Godwin and Tim White play with four receivers, six O linemen, and that would get Fig in the game for another American. But I'm not sure how many plays are in the 4L/2-back package. That is something that remains to be seen. What we do know is that there would be great protection. There would be great protection with six big 300-pounders on the field. So that's an interesting storyline, man. And so while we're just trying to figure this out, I don't even think we should try to have too deep of a thesis. We're going to see very shortly when we kick the ball off. And when we do kick the ball off, I want to understand what matchup you're going to be looking at, because we talked about great playmakers on both sides of the ball. We talked about some question mark guys on both sides of the ball. Which matchup are you going to be looking at when this one starts, to see who's really going to get the better of who in this game?
Yeah, I think the matchup I'm going to look at immediately is Lawson versus Schoen, right? Like it's a new guy versus one of the best receivers in the CFL. There's going to be help out there for him, right? There's going to be help with Chris Edwards. I'm sure Lawrence Woods, they have something drawn up to help him out. Maybe roll the coverage toward those two guys, right? Like wherever they show up, maybe put a low zone in front of them, right? Get hands on Dalton Schoen when he's coming off the line to slow him down, not let him get the momentum up to speed so that we can see what he's trying to run. The back end can see what's going on, right? What I'm also looking for is maybe a couple doubles, right? Maybe taking Stavros over there and helping with Lawson and then kind of saying, hey, Chris Edwards, that safety isn't behind you anymore in man-to-man coverage. You have to hold up on your own, right? Something along those lines. But that's my first look because I think in Winnipeg's offensive meeting, as soon as they heard Tunde was not playing or Richard Leonard, I think all of their plays moved to the field side. Every one of their big plays they dialed up is let's go to the field side. These guys are new guys in, right? Let's test them. Let's see how they can do. And I think Winnipeg's going to feel confident trying to throw at that field. So that's where my matchup is.
Well, I'm thinking similar to you, but a little differently. One of the challenges that the Ticats had in their last game was when the wide receivers were added to the box or they had a nasty split, meaning they weren't far away from the tackle in the offensive line. They were close to the tackle in the offensive line, creating a de facto extra linebacker out of those defensive backs, forcing the defensive backs to play the run, to get off of blocks, to hold the edge, to turn the runner back inside. The Ticats weren't always their best when forced to put the defensive backs in run coverage, into run stopping mentality. So I would expect Winnipeg, a great running team, to do more of the same, knowing that they're going to have two people at the defensive back position to the field who haven't got a ton of reps shedding blocks with physical receivers like Dembski, who is not afraid to get his nose in there and really just stop block somebody. So I'm actually looking to see what Stavros does versus Brady Oliveira in the run game, because Stavros is going to have an opportunity to get 8 tackles. Stavros can run the alley. Stavros can back clean up, and I'm sure that if he has it in his heart to, he can get up there and get 6, 8, 10 tackles in this game just off of the play calls that Winnipeg will have. And I think that will be one of the key things for me to look for. Are the DBs being involved in the run game, and how much is their want to be involved in that run game? That will be an interesting storyline. Now, we talk about both of the teams, we talk about all the matchups, but I always like to highlight one star player, one person who's got the potential to put the team on their back, or even just crack it open, create some momentum. And if there's one person on either side of the ball, who would that be?
Yeah, I think it's time for Tyreek McAllister to show back up, whether it's offensive or whether it's special teams, right? Ticats right now, the good thing that I'm seeing is that they have the most big play returns out of anybody in the CFL, right? And what that's going to do is that's going to help that offense come along. And like I said, we're at the point now with this Ticats offense where it's not helping it come along. It's going to put up some yards. They're going to do well right now, right? Taylor Powell is throwing the ball. This is a great test for them. But what better way than Tyreek McAllister to get involved? We saw him take that when he first showed up on the scene, that bubble to the house, right? We saw a couple big-time returns coming back. When you look at a guy like Fraser Sopik, who's back in, right? Somebody that, you don't really see all that often because he's not necessarily starting, might get in on packages on second and long, but he is a great special teams player. He's been around this league for a while, right? Or Richie Sindani getting himself involved a little bit more. This special teams unit is really rounding out with like a Nick Cross, a Bailey Feltmate. All these guys you're seeing that are listed as the backups, these are the guys that are going to help a guy like Tyreek McAllister get going, right? And that's what I'm waiting to see that we haven't seen in the past couple weeks as this Ticats offense has been rolling, as the defense is getting turnovers. Now it's the special teams' turn to, okay, let's get a couple big returns, and let's see Tyreek McAllister maybe take a bubble to the house or whatever it might be, a little bit of yak yards like we were talking about with Nick Dembski. I'm really looking for him to have a breakout game.
Yeah, I would love to see action in the backfield. And for me, that means Malik Carney showing up the way that he showed up last year when Winnipeg came to Tim Hortons Field. Sack, fumble, scoop, and score. I think if the Ticats can create opportunities, bonus possessions, create hidden field position changes, or just get the ball back to their offense a few more times in an opportunity to score. Just the opportunities to score is what's going to matter, because at the end of the day, the whole game is about points, and you got to find ways to get them. If the Ticats can score on defense, I think that starts with this defensive line or a guy like Malik Carney, who he's shown game-breaking plays before, And I think it would be no better time than September 16th for him to show up and do the same again today. 4 p.m. kickoff. It's South Plaza Saturday. Winnipeg Bluebombers are coming in searching for their 11th win, but the Ticats, of course, are trying to put a stop to all that noise as they search for their 6th. This is Tiger Cats Game Day presented by Tiffany Gate Fresh Gourmet on the Ticats Audio Network. Thank you for listening to us again. My name is Courtney Stephen, and for Mike Daly, we hope you guys enjoy the game. If you're listening to the game, listen.ticats.ca, as always, where Luke and RJ will have the call for you. Of course, a pregame, you've got Andy and Bubba O'Neill who will get you ready as well. So for Mike, this is Courtney signing off until next time, and we hope you have a great game day.
It's game day and you're ready. So are we. Let us know your thoughts. Email us at gameday@ticats.ca. Courtney Stephen and Mike Daly are here every game day with their insights into today's game. Subscribe to the Ticats Audio Network on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.